Now, even as this assault, of course, is gathering pace, joining us live from our Delhi studios right now is Major General G.D. Bakshi. Major General Bakshi, good morning. Thank you. What do you make of the pace at which the Russians are now advancing? What we know so far, of course, is that that 40-mile-long convoy that we were talking about yesterday is much closer to Kyiv. We're also hearing that airborne assault troops have been dropped into Kharkiv. How do you look at what's happening today?
Look, the Russians are now intensifying their operations. In the south, they are using maneuver and rapid progress. In the north and east, north meaning Kyiv and Kharkiv, and the east meaning Donbass, that is Donetsk and Lugansk, right? They are going steadily, methodically, because the opposition is much stiffer here, so they are going steadily, methodically. So far, they have fired 400 missiles of various types, Iskandars, cruise missiles, etc., which are precision-guided munitions, very, very accurate. And they were primarily targeting, they have used this to target military infrastructure. Now, since yesterday, they have started using their conventional artillery. Traditionally, the Russians rely very heavily on their traditional artillery, multi-barrel rocket launchers like the Grads, the Urals, etc., with which they are bombarding very heavily. Kharkiv as a city is almost destroyed. The same, I am very sorry to say, will happen in Kyiv. There will be very little buildings left standing in Kyiv after the battle is over. Now you might say, why are they targeting civilian areas? I am afraid the fighting is in civilian areas. These cement concrete buildings are being used by the defender to sight their missiles, their machine guns, to cover the roads and the streets. So fighting in built up areas takes place building by building, street by street. So quite obviously the city will be totally destroyed. I am very sorry the West has cheerled the Ukrainians to fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian. Not one boot on the ground has been put by NATO, by America. Like with Abdul Ghani in Afghanistan, they have left him to fight on their own, and I am very sorry, but it looks like that the fate of the Ukrainian president may unfortunately be very similar. So you have to make a decision what is the form of war you will use against forces which are conventionally so superior to you. In Iraq, they switched to guerrilla warfare. The Russians had advised the Iraqis ki don't put up a conventional war resistance because you will take heavy punishment. You know, in Iraq, the Americans had launched a 40-day air campaign. Before they sent their ground troops in, they had flattened the whole of Iraq. So this morality play now being enacted is rather hypocritical. In Yugoslavia, 30 days of bombing before their ground troops entered. Here the Russians did just 1 day of what is called suppression of enemy air defenses, and they hit 11 airfields, 18 radars, and they went in. The Ukrainians moved a lot of their equipment to the western part to keep them out of harm's way, and now they are trying to get them back. As and when it comes back into action, it is being destroyed. We are being told that Russia does not have air superiority. Please tell me, how can you have 45-kilometer long columns of assault forces on the roads if you didn't have air superiority? A sneak attacks here and there by a Bakhtiar Turkish drone, or some MiG-29 which is supposed to be the bravest fighter in the world, etc., etc. MiG-29 is no comparison to Su-35. No comparison to Su-35. It's a much older aircraft. They are both Russian aircraft. They, and even the Ukrainian tanks are mostly their even the Ukrainian tanks are mostly their T-64s, which are two generations behind the Russian T-72s and T-90s, which are the bulk tanks being used. So when it comes to tank battle, they will lose. You see, militarily, it is a foregone conclusion. Kyiv will fall. It is not a question of if, but when. And the more you delay, the more devastation will take place.
But Major General G.D. Bakshi, as you are pointing out,
that is the sad fact.
Obviously,
in Iraq,
there
they
is
had switched to guerrilla warfare because they realized.
Obviously, Major General Bakshi, as you are saying, there is little comparison that Ukraine offers to Russia in terms of its military might. Russia, of course, is the second most powerful army in this in the world currently. But given the visuals that it is now, emanating of civilians being killed, a protracted conflict will not be in favor of Russia as well. What do you think about that?
Yes, I totally agree with that. Before the war had started, the Indian military review, we had done a war game and we had said this will last from 7 to 10 days. I think the Russian objective should be able to finish it in 10 days, maximum 2 weeks. We had captured the whole of Bangladesh in 13 days. That is a little less than 2 weeks, right? And by that time, the blitzkrieg for a country this size should be over. The Russians were initially, they thought it would be a repeat of 2008 Georgia or 2014 Crimea. They were anticipating that the Ukrainians would surrender. But you can't base a plan that the enemy will surrender. You have to be ready to take it beyond. So initially, they just used their paratroopers, their airborne air assault forces. They landed at the Antonov Air Base and they went in straight, the paratroopers, to capture Kyiv. Quite obviously, it was quite a tough nut to crack because that is the Ukrainian capital, and the Ukrainian capital has been, the Ukrainian army has been given a lot of anti-tank guided missiles, the javelins, the shoulder-fired Stinger missiles by the Americans. So their fighting capability has improved over 2008, 2014 especially. Their fighting capability has improved a bit. Now the Russians quickly learned their lesson. The Russians quickly found out that the hybrid war model of General Gerasimov, the Russian chief of staff who did a brilliant job in 2014, is really not working now. It is total war. It is full-scale conventional military war, and therefore they have to use the standard Russian assault methods, which is they surround a city, they ask the civilian population to get the hell out along designated routes, then they shell, they bomb, they bombard, ruthlessly, and then they go in. So now that is what they are doing. They have surrounded all the cities.
General Bakshi, also, one of...
my intention, in Bangladesh, we had surrounded and bypassed cities.
General Bakshi, I just wanted to ask you,
Russians, I think their military...
General Bakshi, I just wanted to ask you, one of the miscalculations perhaps that the Russians have done, including this kind of warfare that they did not obviously perhaps prepare for, is the fact that there will be a large number of civilians who will now join this fight. And, wars are made out of stories as well as, tactical advancements. Now, the stories that are coming out of Ukraine seem to suggest that people will not forget, the bravery of the common man there. So, in that sense also, do you think that the Russians miscalculated a large amount of the resistance that we see from normal people?
Look, the simple fact is, ethnically, actually language-wise, ethnically they are the same Slavic people. Language-wise, there is a strong difference. Language can be a big factor. You remember the Bengali-speaking and the Urdu-speaking Pakistanis. Look at the way they fought. They were both Muslims. So the fact of the matter is that there is that nationalist sentiment which has been whipped up over the last 8-10 years. in Ukraine. That is why the Russians insist on calling them Nazis, National Socialists kind of a thing. They are intensely nationalistic as far as their country is concerned, except the Russian-speaking areas where quite obviously their leaning is towards Russia. So there are, you are very right, there are two wars taking place concurrently. You know, one is the information war, the media war, the war of narratives. The second is the war on the ground, right? The Russians initially were looking for the war of narratives. That is why they used only precision-guided munitions. They attacked only military targets. They showed a lot of restraint. But then they paid a price for it, because when the Ukrainians, cheerled by the West, decided to put up a fight, then they had no option but to switch to phase 2. And the phase 2 is to surround, batter brutally, and then go in for the kill. So all that the West has managed to achieve is they have put all sorts of sanctions. They will really bite a few months later. How much they will bite remains to be seen, because it is also affecting Europe. How long will Europe stay without gas?
Yes.
How long will European industries stay without gas? It's not just for domestic heating. The aluminium industry, the titanium industry in France, in Germany, they are all taking heavy knocks.
Absolutely,
Number of
as you're
firms
pointing
will
out,
close
General
down.
Bakshi,
Economic price
we are
will be
already
paid by the
seeing
Germans,
the
the French
benchmark
and
for
the
oil
other
prices
people.
going up. It's climbed above $110 a barrel for the first time in about 8 years. So, as you pointed out, it's going to be a big shock.